Welcome back to the Brothers War EDH. My name is Ryan, and today we are bringing you our very first deck tech of the channel featuring Greensleeves, Maro-Sorcerer. Greensleeves Maro-Sorcerer, 5 mana, 3 and 2 green, legendary creature elemental, protection from planeswalkers, from wizards. Its power and toughness is equal to the number of lands you control, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 3/3 green badger creature token. When I first saw this card, I was like, this is pretty cool. In the command zone, I can play this. I can ramp it out. I can start just playing lands, creating badgers, and swinging wide. But also too, the fact that Greensleeves power and toughness is equal to the number of lands you control offers another alternative win in the Voltron route, which can be sneaky depending on if somebody happens to be wide open and you have Greensleeves out and it's like a 5/5 6/6 7/7. Over time, you punch in a few hits and they're just dead to commander damage. So when I first saw this, I was like, I really want to play this commander on the channel. If you haven't seen that video, you can check it out. It was our last gameplay video. That was really fun. But what you see is what you get with this commander. I'm going to put it just bluntly with you. You're playing lands, you're creating badgers, you're ramping, you're playing all your classic extra land drop spells. That's all you're really doing. And there's, to me, it's a very, very simple yet effective commander. And I did tweak this deck a little bit today. I had a list on our Moxfield that I did change today, so there are going to be some new cards. A couple things to note before I go into the sub categories for this deck. One of the rules that I have right now when I built this deck was I didn't necessarily want to have Craterhoof Behemoth in this deck. Not that I mean, card's amazing, obviously, really, and with natural order and the fact that I can make a badger and just sack the badger, get Craterhoof, and swing out for the win. I was like, I want to see if I can try to play this deck without that card. So that's pretty much like the only thing. I also don't have a lot of like the crazy cards that you can put in this deck, like Gaia's Cradle. I don't have that, but I do have Growing Rights in here, which I'll get into later on. So nothing too crazy. There are some expensive cards in this deck. I mean, on here it's showing 1,000 for the deck. So with that being said, let's get into the deck itself. So first you need card draw for this deck. And a lot of these cards are pretty much staples in the format for specifically mono green. Like Regal Force has to probably be one of my favorite green creatures of all time. I actually play this a lot in my Seaton deck, my Druid deck, and you're drawing just so many cards. And considering that you're creating green creatures with Greensleeves, and and there's some other cards that can create other tokens. I mean, one time I drew playtesting, I drew like 15 cards off this, and that can be considered Christmas land, but it's just such a good card in this deck because you can tutor it really, really easily. You're ramping, so the 7 mana cost doesn't really matter too much. Because you're gonna be playing a bunch of those ramp spells and getting it out when you can. You'll have, well, not when you can. You obviously want to like set this card up with like a lot of creatures, but in general, this is like probably my favorite card draw spell in here. Shamanic Revelation, also another really good one, and then Elemental Bonds was probably one that I think was like a classic one because the Badgers are 3/3s. There were some other cards that I believe it was Garrick's Uprising, the enchantment that whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters, you can draw. But You know, in this case, they're all 3/3, so I wanted to stick to like that theme. A card that's kind of weird in this deck, Horn of Greed. I have it in here because I have a lot of lands, and you know, as you see later on, you know, I'm going to be trying to play lands, you know, extra lands from my hand and from the graveyard. One thing that's kind of bad about this card is that the other players can also draw when they play lands. You know, hopefully by the time I get enough cards, it'll be okay. This is a card that I thought about cutting for like something else, but you know, we'll just go from there. Greater Good. Now, with the Badgers, this seems pretty bad. You're basically sacking a Badger, drawing 3, and just discarding the cards that you had. So you want to be careful. This is one of those cards where you want to have like more cards in your hand to discard. But really, what makes this card really good to me is you can sack Greensleeves itself, and you can just draw a ton of cards off of Greensleeves. Like I had in a couple, I mean, in most of the playtestings that I do, you know, you're always ramping and you're always getting more land. So Greensleeves can be upwards of like a 8/8/9/9. You sack this, draw 9, discard 3. So if you know, effectively drawing 6, and then you just play Greensleeves again because you have lands. You have so many lands that you just end up, you know, commander tax doesn't really matter all that much because you're gonna have so many lands. I also have Orin Frostfang and Toski in here because, oh, I mean, you know, if you're playing any kind of like token deck, you know, these cards are really good because you're just gonna be drawing a ton of cards. And I love Frostfang because it gives the creatures death touch, so it almost makes it even harder for them to block. So it's almost guaranteed card draw. Obviously, you got the tracker. You know, you're playing a lot of lands. You're getting the clues, and those clues add up over time. You also have a lot of mana, so sacking the clues isn't gonna just tap you out most of the time. So you know, this card is just really good in this deck. But this is the majority of the card draw that I have. Harmonize is pretty low on the, you know, on the scale of like powerful like card draw. So you know, I'm always open to more things, you know, to play as far as my deck. So if you happen to find anything in this deck for whatever category, please let me know. A card that I was considering was the Great Henge, because you know I do run like 20 something creatures in this deck, and like, you know, it's just a busted card, and Greensleeves just makes it. Greensleeves makes it pretty cheap because it's already pretty big. I might have to look into that one. But anyways, going from my card draw spells, we have our land utility cards. These are going to be all the cards that I can play additional lands off the top, lands from the graveyard. You know, just cards like that, because you know the goal is to get the lands out and just keep on recurring those lands. In regards to the graveyard cards, the graveyard land playing cards, I play fetches in this deck. If you know, let's say you have like exploration, like Crucible of Worlds, you know, and you had like, you know, a couple of those fetch lands, you know, you play a fetch land, get the ETB trigger for, you know, for like Greensleeves or like some other card, or the other cards that we'll go into that make tokens. You sack it, you get a forest, you get another trigger, you play the fetch land again, and that you're just getting so much value, and you're generating all of these creatures, all of these badgers that are just going to overwhelm your opponents. What I like about Ashaya in this deck is that the creatures you play basically enter as force, so you get landfall triggers off of that. Really cool interaction. You know, all of these are pretty much, you know, there's a lot of like redundancy cards, but you know, there are some cool stuff like Tireless Provisioner. Like you can make, you know, food or treasure, and you know, so it's ramp, or you know, you can have something to like help you gain life later on if you're starting to run low, because honestly the fetch lands might start to cause you to lose life over time if you're not careful, but you know, that's not really like a big deal. But yeah, this is pretty much you know, a very important part of this deck, being able to play lands, play as many as you can every single turn, get those badgers so that you can utilize them, to attack or in whatever scenario that you have. Obviously, gotta have ramp in this deck. I do have the mana rocks in here. Some people technically don't really think that this is actually ramp, but more of just like mana rocks or whatever. But I just included them in here. But so you got like all of the suspects like Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, 3 visits. I really like Traverse the Outlands because if your Greensleeves is like a 10/10. This deck runs I'm about to look. I believe it runs like 30 lands. 30 sorry, not 30 lands, 30 forests. So like 5 mana, find 10 forests and then with Greensleeves you're making 10 badgers. If you have, elemental bond, you're drawing, at that point you're just going a little too far, but finding 10 lands and putting them onto the battlefield, to me is pretty spicy. So I got that stuff in here. I got like the Wood Elves and the Farhaven Elf in here. I actually thought about, because there's a couple of cards that I didn't have in here, Cultivate and Kodama's Reach. I figured that actually in this deck those might actually be potentially better, because unless I'm utilizing the bodies on the Wood Elves and the Farhaven Elves, having my exploration cards type cards where I can play more lands, that's 3 mana, find 2 lands, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and that might just be better than these. Actually, I mean, I might consider that. Actually, I might consider taking out Farhaven and Wood Elves for those, just for those cases. Now, like with like Regal Force, Shamanic Revelation. Actually, you know what? I think that these are probably fine staying in here, because those, these cards, help with like getting creature count. It also helps with like some of the win cons in the deck as well. So yeah, I'm gonna keep these in here. I think that there's more value in that than having the extra land drop from Cultivate and Kodama's Reach. Not saying that those are like necessarily bad cards, but I think that these might be better. So yeah, gotta have that ramp. I run 9 removal spells in here. What's cool about Greensleeves is that Greensleeves just gets so big, it's pretty much gonna survive the fights that these cards are going to put it through. Specifically the fight cards. So your Inscription, Tailswipe, Kalani or Colony Ambush, and one of my favorite cards in this deck, actually, Uvenwald Tracker. This card is really good in this deck. Normally it's gonna survive whatever fight it happens. It does. In mono green, it's very difficult to find really good removal. So you just gotta work with like what you got. Obviously I got like the Force of Vigor, Nature's Claim, Beast Within, Beseiju, really good card. Doubles as a land. This card's busted. I also really like Kenrith's Transformation. It replaces itself, and I mean, it's just a really good efficient spell. Some of the considerations for the deck, obviously like Song of the Dryads is really good. I don't really know if I wanted to have it in here because it well, I mean, I could probably find a spot for it because it's just really good. It's really good removal in mono green. I like being able to replace Kenrith's Transformation with like another card, but the versatility of Song of the Dryads is like really good. It also makes Commander's Force, which is like very, very hard for like the opponents to like deal with. So I'm probably gonna have to find a spot for that in here. But yeah, this is basically my removal. Uvenwald Tracker, I just want to bring up again. These are my token generator cards, Avenger, Rampaging Baloth, and Skew Swarm, which I consider to be, pretty much the same as, Skew Swarm and Baloths are pretty much going to be, very similar to like the landfall part of it. But, Avenger, just having all those lands, we all know Avenger's really good in this deck. And it's also really good with Crater Hoof, but like I said before, I don't have that in this deck. But, being able to find this card, put it out when you have a ton of lands, make all of those tokens, and then just being able to Shamanic Revelation or the other card that I mentioned, Regal Force, stuff like that, and Finale of Devastation, which is like one of the win cons that I have for having like a lot of mana. But we'll get to that in a second. So these are basically my token generating cards. Rampaging Baloth, it's probably because Skewed Swarm to me, like this card can get out of hand very, very fast. And like, if it fits well with like the mass token theme of the deck. So Rampaging Baloth is actually a card that I thought about taking out. I actually thought about replacing this card for Bane of Progress, which I forgot to go over in the removal part. I should be putting Bane of Progress in this deck because I would love to have a board wipe that can deal with mass artifact and enchantment decks. So but yeah, going down to my utility cards, obviously Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. I did have a Whisper Silk Cloak in the deck, but it was kind of clunky. But I really liked the unblockable part of that card, but I just think that it was kind of just too clunky, and I think that I'm okay with like not having it in the deck. Heroic Intervention, one of the best protection spells in green in the format. Eldrazi Monument, this card right here, I didn't have before, but then I found myself making so many tokens, and I was like, you know what, this card just needs to be played in this deck. I mean, flying and indestructible. So it gets over creatures, it dodges board wipes, and the whole sack of creature at the upkeep thing doesn't really matter because you're making so many creatures. So this is basically one of my finishers. I noticed that like a lot of the decks that I saw before was running like Coat of Arms, but I think that this to me is better than that, because unless my deck was solely dedicated to like one specific card type, or sorry, one specific creature type, Eldrazi Monument, I think it's just a better card in this deck, at least in my opinion. I love Genesis Wave. You're making a lot of mana, and like what's funny about this card too is that you get the permanents, you get land permanents as well, so that helps to trigger all of your landfall stuff. Obviously, like your Growing Rights, your Sylvan Library, just like green, green staples and like creature based decks. That like wants to make a lot of creatures. I don't have Gaia's Cradle. If I did, I'd be running it, but this is the next best thing. And then Balaged Recovery. If you're not playing MDFCs, if you're not playing some of them, then I would definitely advise you to consider playing them, because this can be a card that can get a card back from your graveyard, or it can be a land that also helps for landfall. And the other one up here, the colony, sorry, the one right here, Colony Ambush, it's removal and it's a land that also triggers for landfall. There was the other one that I forgot the name of it, the Mythic Green MDFC card. Every time I play with that card, it just doesn't really do well for me. But if it does well for you, I forgot. Turn Timber Symbiosis. I think that I need more green creatures in this deck to make that card do better. But I'm also more about the lands in this deck than the creatures, so I just don't have that card in here. But going through, that's our utility cards, and obviously like the lands. I try to keep the lands very, very simple. Not a lot of utility lands in here. Obviously, like Ancient Tomb is a really good card. I thought about Temple of the False God, but the reason why I don't really like that card is because before 5 lands, if it's in your opening hand, it's just sitting there. And obviously, you're playing a lot of lands, but I think that I'm fine without it because I'm ramping so much, and that's just, I'm just not really I'm not really huge on that card, but that's just me. But obviously all of our fetches here, to find our forests, our Prismatic Vista. I noticed that there were also some of the fetch lands where you pay 1 sack to find, like the panoramas for that can find a forest. Those are kind of weird because you're paying mana to find the land, and you're also those lands enter the battlefield tapped, I believe. So I decided to keep those out, but also too, I don't want to play too less force in the deck because I might run into a scenario where, I've tutored all my forests and I'm playing more of these like tutor up a forest card and they're not working out. They're just like fail to find. So I try to keep my forest count high. So I do have 30 in there. So that's basically what that is. But yeah, my lands are pretty simple. There's probably some cards that I can put in here though. For example, Yavimaya Hollow would probably be a good one because it helps to regenerate my Greensleeves in case. I might find a spot for that in here. I don't have the card, so is the reason why I don't have it in the deck. But I might find a spot for it. And I do have Wasteland and Strip Mine. Because there's some scenarios like land destruction is kind of like, it doesn't really come up too often, but in case it does, I have these. But what's really good about this deck with these is all of my play from the graveyard cards for lands and my extra land drop land. So it's like, if I get to a point where I'm trying to close out the game, I can start by destroying lands with these cards. If I have Azusa and Crucible of Worlds, and then Strip Mine is in the graveyard. It's like, okay, well, play Strip Mine, destroy a land, do it 2 more times, and that also triggers landfall too. So I really like these cards in this deck. My tutors are here. I do play a pretty decent amount of them. Obviously natural order I mentioned before, being able to sack a badger or a beast or, a scute swarm / insect to find one of the best green creatures in my deck is just really, really strong. Natural order into Regal Force is a pretty common one. Or, maybe finding a specific creature. Let me go back to my creatures up here because I believe that like Orin Frostfang, or even like a Toski, or I really like Ancient Green Warden. I should have mentioned this earlier, but Green Warden doubles those triggers for Greensleeves. So it just gets really, really out of hand very, very quickly. So I do have those things in here. Tooth and Nail, pretty much the same thing. Oh, you know what? You know what card I should be running in this deck now that I think about it? It's funny. It's funny when you're making your deck, you have a card that you forgot, that shared summons card, the 5 mana find 2 creatures with different names. I should be playing that card in this deck. It's also instant speed, I believe. And for draw, the Garruk's Uprising. And yeah, you know what? I'm still making updates to this deck. I'm just saying. But overall, this is everything that's what's happening with the deck. Because I'm about to go into kind of like what you do. It's just very, very straightforward, right? You're playing, early turns. You're trying to ramp out your Greensleeves. You're trying to set up to get the ball rolling. You're playing your lands. You're getting the land drops. You're getting the landfall triggers. And then eventually, you're building up to where you can do a natural order into Regal Force to draw more cards. You're trying to find your, you're trying to churn through your deck, using stuff like Greater Good to sack Greensleeves, draw a ton of cards to find your stuff like your Eldrazi Monument, to close out the game. Drop like an Orin Frostfang, draw a ton of cards that way. But it is very, very straightforward. A deck like this is simple for someone that's new. Let's say you just started playing Magic and you just happen to stumble upon, our last game with, our last Dominaria United gameplay episode. A deck like this is very, very easy to pick up. But yeah, this is the Greensleeves Maro-Sorcerer deck tech. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. Like I said before, if there's any cards that I might have not mentioned, if you have a Greensleeves deck, would love for you to to comment down below some of the cards that you might be playing in your deck. Maybe there's some cards in here that are just not good that I'm playing that you think that you think that I can like take out to replace. I would love to hear from y'all on that. And if you happen to enjoy this content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, turn on that notification bell for future episodes. And we're hoping to be able to get some more deck techs out in the future. So with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful day.